Ebony had the kind of silence that didn't beg to be broken. Her voice, when she used it, was soft like wind through feathers, and her laughter came rarely, but when it did, it felt like something rare and clean. In the village of Amuko, she was known as the girl with kind hands. Hands that could calm the wildest hen, hands that could untangle the tightest knots, hands that never struck back even when slapped by fate. The village itself was famed far beyond its borders for its chickens, tall, strong feathered birds, with crests like carved fire and golden roosters whose crows were said to ward off bad dreams. Traders would come from distant valleys to barter for one egg, a single feather, even a rooster's comb. The villagers held their birds close, and those who raised them were respected. Ebony had once belonged to that quiet circle of respected hands. Her mother, Mama Ifioma, had been the best chicken keeper in all of Amuko. She spoke to the birds like they were children, fed them herbs to keep their feathers lustrous, sang lullabies to the chicks at night. Ebony had followed her everywhere, mimicking her mother's careful movements, brushing straw aside, counting eggs by candlelight, whispering into warm feathers. But everything changed the day Mama Ifioma died. Her death came swiftly, a fever that rose like fire and left only silence behind. Ebony was 12. The morning after the burial, her father, Okafor, who had always been distant but decent, changed. He began to walk heavier, speak harsher. He stopped looking Ebony in the eyes. She thought it was grief. Maybe it was. Or maybe it was guilt. Within a month he married Nwoi. Nwoi arrived with smooth skin, sharp eyes, and a daughter who looked like a polished mirror, Rena, with her glossy braids and lips always puckered in disdain. The compound changed as if overnight. The chicken hut was swept only by Ebony. The house was repainted in Nwoi's chosen colors. The cooking fire was stoked only when Rena was hungry. Ebony found herself pushed further into shadow with each passing day. At first it was the small things, being served last, being given the chores no one else wanted, being scolded for speaking even when answering a question. Then came the bigger things. "You take up too much space," Nwoi said one evening standing in the middle of the main hut. "Always underfoot. Chickens need room and so do guests. From now on you'll sleep where you belong with your friends." And so, Ebony was sent to the chicken coop. It was not large. A low wooden structure with straw-stuffed corners and a roof patched with palm leaves. At night, it was loud with clucks and shifting feet. During storms, the wind tore at the cracks and blew dust across her mat. Ebony didn't cry the first night, nor the second. But by the third, when a rat scurried across her ankle in the dark, she wrapped her arms around herself and whispered into the warm feathered bodies beside her, "Don't leave me too." Eating was a ritual of humiliation. Nwoi and Rena would dine at the front of the compound with Okafor, laughing and sipping spiced broth. Ebony was made to wait until the bowls were nearly empty. She would kneel in the dust, pick the meat scraps from bones and carry her portion back to the coop. "Better not drop it," Rena once sneered. "Even the chickens have standards." And still the village said nothing. Some women clucked their tongues when they saw Ebony hauling firewood alone. Some elders frowned when she passed by with bruises on her arms. But Nwoi was a master of appearances. In public she laughed loudly, donated coins at temple, complimented the priestess's robes, and hosted elaborate market gatherings. She spoke of Ebony as, "my husband's daughter, quiet but we love her dearly." The villagers nodded, not wanting to interfere with another home's way. They had their own daughters to think about. Only the chickens saw the truth. Every morning, Ebony woke before the sun. She fed the birds before herself. She cleaned their feathers, stroked their backs, checked their feet for thorns. They responded with soft coos and gentle pecks at her fingers. In their warmth she found rhythm. In their silence she found company. She sang to them, too, old songs her mother had taught her, in a voice too quiet for the house to hear but just loud enough to keep the coop from turning into a tomb. Songs of patience. Of rivers that outlast stones. Of roots that grow stronger underground. And every night she returned to the coop, bowl in hand, body sore, spirit frayed but not broken. She did not dream much anymore. But sometimes, just before sleep, she would imagine a hen laying a perfect golden egg. One that would gleam so brightly, no one could ignore it. One that would turn every head. One that would make someone, anyone, finally see her. She never expected the dream to come true. The air in the village buzzed with preparation. Every broom was in motion, every pot scrubbed to a shine, every child reminded twice, if not 3 times, to behave. The village council was arriving from across the river, elders known not just for their wisdom but for their wealth. Some whispered that among them was a noble son, unmarried, with a cowherd's strength and a merchant's gold. Nwoi heard those whispers with greedy ears. For 2 weeks she fussed over every detail. The compound was swept until not a grain of rice remained on the ground. Fresh paint was slapped onto the hut's sides, and new cloths hung like banners along the doorway. Rena was dressed in bright reds and blues, her lips painted with crushed berries, her hands softened with oils Ebony had ground from shea seeds. Each morning Nmoy made her walk with a basket on her head to train her spine for grace, and each evening she rehearsed polite greetings and practiced serving tea without spilling a drop. "This feast is our door," Nmoy repeated, pinching the folds of Rena's wrapper. "If you serve the elders well, especially the noble's son, you may be married before the moon turns." Rena smirked. "And Ebony?" Nmoy waved her off. "She'll be too busy scrubbing the pots to be seen. That's the only talent she has." Ebony stood just outside the doorway holding a basket of washed vegetables. She did not flinch at the words. She'd stopped expecting kindness. She clutched the woven handles tightly and waited until she was dismissed. The night before the feast, the slaughter began. 10 chickens, handpicked from the village's finest flocks, were gathered. Ebony, as always, was the one made to do it. Her hands did not tremble. Her heart did not race. She whispered small apologies to each bird as she worked, offering short prayers for peace as her mother had once taught her. When it was done, she cleaned the blood from the stones and gathered the feathers to dry. The next day, before the sun even peeked over the tree line, she was already boiling water, peeling yams, grinding spices and washing bowls in the stream. By noon her back ached. By afternoon her hands were raw. And still Nmoy did not let her rest. "There's soot on this pot," she snapped, holding up a calabash. "Do it again. Do you want the elders to think we eat from ash?" Rena watched from a stool, sipping palm wine as she examined her nails. Ebony took the pot, nodded, and returned to the water basin. She did not sigh. She did not speak. As the sky darkened, lanterns were lit. Mats were laid out in neat circles. The aroma of grilled chicken and honeyed plantains filled the air. Music began, soft, respectful, the kind meant for elders not dancing. The village council arrived, greeted with wide smiles and low bows. Rena stood beside her mother at the entrance to the compound, her arms full of folded napkins and pitchers of cool water. She looked radiant, composed, obedient. Ebony peeked from behind the cooking hut, face smudged with ash, sleeves damp from washing. She watched the elders settle onto the mats, their long robes embroidered with ancestral symbols, their walking sticks etched with generations. Among them sat a tall young man with kind eyes, listening more than he spoke. Ebony recognized him from the whispers. Nmoy had chosen this night carefully. Ebony was not allowed to serve. Instead, when the food was ready, she was handed a broken clay bowl filled with bones and scraps, necks, feet, greasy skin. "Eat in the coop," Nmoy hissed, loud enough for the nearest servants to hear. "You smell like blood and soap." Rena laughed softly, brushing imaginary dust from her lap. Ebony said nothing. She bowed slightly, turned, and walked across the compound. As she passed the corner where the lanterns no longer reached, she let her breath out slowly. She entered the coop and sat cross-legged in the straw, back resting against the low wooden wall. The chickens rustled gently around her, clucking in their sleep. Some nudged close, familiar and warm. One hopped into her lap. She reached into the bowl, tearing a piece of chicken skin with her fingers and chewing slowly, as if it mattered what it tasted like. Her eyes burned, but she willed the tears to stay hidden. Even here, alone in the dark, she would not cry. Outside, laughter rang out. Inside, silence held her like a second skin. She finished her scraps and set the bowl aside. A hen pecked at the edge curiously. Ebony scratched behind its neck and whispered, "It's all right. I've shared worse meals." She lay down in the straw, pulling the edge of her wrapper over her shoulders. Above her, moonlight filtered through a crack in the wall, casting a silver line across her chest. She closed her eyes and thought of her mother. Of soft hands. Of laughter that hadn't sounded like Rena's. Of a time when eating with chickens had been a game, not a punishment. A sudden gust of wind stirred the straw. The chickens ruffled and shifted. Ebony curled tighter into herself, unaware that just beside her, beneath one of the oldest hens, something strange and glowing had begun to pulse faintly in the dark. Ebony's sleep was never deep. Not since her mother passed. But that night, with her belly half full and the coop unusually still, she drifted into something softer than usual, not quite sleep, not quite wakefulness. The warmth of the chickens pressed against her sides. Their bodies rose and fell with each breath like the tide of some ancient ocean. Her fingers curled around her knees. She dreamed she was a chick again, sleeping beneath her mother's arm, wrapped in softness and the scent of wood smoke. Then, a sharp gust. It slammed against the coop's wall with the sound of a drumbeat, scattering dry straw into the air. Ebony jolted upright. The hens stirred, clucking in agitation. One began to flap, knocking her bowl aside. The coop's roof creaked, and a soft rustling passed through the rafters like someone walking overhead. But no one was there. Then came the sound. Not loud. Not sudden. A gentle, cracking sigh. Ebony turned her head toward the oldest hen, Mama Redbeak, named by her mother years ago, a chicken long past her laying years, whose feathers had dulled to ash gray and whose eyes seemed always half asleep. But now Mama Redbeak was standing stiffly, her wings slightly outstretched, trembling as if caught between fear and power. Beneath her the straw rustled. And then Ebony saw it. Round. Luminous. Humming with a warmth that was not fire. An egg. But not like any egg Ebony had seen in her life. It glowed. A soft gold that pulsed like a heartbeat. The light was not blinding but alive, like it was breathing. Ebony gasped, but the sound caught in her throat. She reached out with one hand, slow as smoke, and touched it. Warm. Real. Her fingers trembled. She looked toward the house, half expecting Noi or Rena to come storming through the coop door and rip it away from her. But there was only darkness, silence, and the quiet breathing of hens. Gently, Ebony scooped the egg into the folds of her wrapper. She looked at Mama Redbeak. The old hen simply blinked once and sat back down, tucking her head under her wing like nothing had happened. Ebony didn't sleep after that. She sat upright in the straw, heart hammering, holding the golden egg close to her chest. The wind eventually quieted. The coop fell still again. But she stayed wide-eyed, staring into the shadows. When the first threads of dawn lit the sky, she buried the egg under a loose plank in the coop's corner, covering it with straw and dust. No one could know. Not yet. Not even the hens seemed to remember. They scratched and flapped as usual, pecking at the feed as she poured it from her basket. She hummed a little tune, the one her mother used to sing at sunrise. A song of blessings and beginnings. A song barely louder than a whisper. She didn't know why. Maybe to calm herself. Maybe to test if the world had truly changed. And then it happened again. A loud cluck. Another shimmer beneath a hen. This time from a younger one, Brighttail, who had only recently begun laying. Ebony blinked. Another egg. And then minutes later, another. Three golden eggs, shining faintly beneath feathers and straw. This time Ebony didn't gasp. She simply stared, then knelt beside the birds and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't touch them right away. She watched the hens nuzzle and guard them as if they were ordinary. But Ebony knew. This was no accident. This was no dream. Something was changing. Or perhaps, something had awoken. That evening, after scrubbing the dishes from the feast and carrying water until her arms ached, Ebony returned to the coop and checked the hiding spot. The first egg was still there, glowing gently. She added the two others beside it, adjusting the straw until they disappeared from sight. Then she sat down among the hens, let them settle around her, and began to hum again. A different song this time. One her mother had whispered when her father was away and the sky was full of stars. A lullaby for chickens and children alike. Her voice trembled a little, but the words flowed. The hens seemed to listen. They leaned into her, pressing warm bodies against her legs. One even climbed into her lap. Her hands moved automatically, smoothing feathers, scratching gently behind wings, scattering grains in tiny circles. As she moved, she spoke. "Thank you," she said again. "I don't know why, but thank you." The hens clucked in rhythm, not in answer, but in comfort. Each day after, she repeated the pattern. She fed them gently with her own hands. She sang softly. She whispered stories. And each morning, another golden egg. 3 became 5. 5 became 8. She kept count in her mind, not daring to write it down. She began to dig a deeper space beneath the coop, wrapping the eggs in cloth, covering them with dried leaves and straw. She would sit there for hours, listening to their quiet hum, watching their soft golden light pulse beneath the earth. She didn't tell anyone, not even the birds. But she began to smile again just a little. The coop no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a temple. And she, a girl once cast aside, forced to eat in the dirt, was slowly becoming its keeper. Ebony grew more careful with each passing day. The coop was no longer just a place of exile, it had become a vault, a sacred place where the impossible stirred in feathers and straw. Each morning brought at least one golden egg, sometimes 2, warm and pulsing gently with an inner glow. She buried them beneath the floorboards, wrapped in palm leaves and layers of dirt. She counted them each night before bed, whispering a thank you into the darkness. She began rising even earlier before the first rooster crowed. She fed the hens by hand, sang to them softly while the village still slept, and whispered old proverbs her mother once said over a pot of boiling yam. "When you walk with silence, the wind does not hear your footsteps," she would say. Ebony clung to those words now like a cloak. But secrets, no matter how carefully hidden, have a way of cracking. It started with a child, little Zuba, a neighbor girl no older than 7, who often wandered barefoot through the village with a stick in hand and endless curiosity in her eyes. She liked to watch Ebony feed the chickens from a safe distance, sitting behind a log and mimicking the clucks. Sometimes Ebony left a few grains near the edge of the coop just for her. One day Zuba pressed her face against the crooked slats of the coop wall, hoping to get a closer look at the chicks. What she saw instead froze her in place. One of the hens, the plump brown one with a crooked toe, was nestled over something glowing. Not glowing like a reflection or a bit of sun on a shell. Glowing like a lantern. Like the spirit lamps during the ancestor festival. An egg shining gold beneath the feathers. Zuba blinked then ran. She didn't tell her mother. Not at first. She told another girl at the stream, who told her brother, who told his cousin, who whispered it to a basket weaver near the market. Within a day, the rumor slithered through the village like smoke. The girl in the chicken coop has a golden bird. It lays eggs like sunlight. People started walking past the coop more slowly. They paused near the fence and pretended to fix their sandals. Some bent to tie imaginary knots. One woman stood humming beside the coop wall for 15 minutes, eyes scanning for a shimmer between the cracks. A man from the northern edge of the village offered to help fix the coop roof, even though it wasn't leaking. Ebony noticed. She kept her face low, her movements deliberate, her songs quieter. But her heart began to drum with a slow, heavy rhythm. Rena noticed too. At first, it was just a flicker of annoyance. Why were so many people suddenly interested in the dirty chicken girl? But then she started noticing where they looked, what they whispered when they thought no one was listening. One evening, she leaned against the doorway of the main hut and watched Ebony carry a basket of feed into the coop. The chickens seemed to crowd around her as if drawn by something stronger than grain. The wind stirred more fiercely when she entered. Her shadow seemed longer, the birds quieter in her presence. Suspicion coiled in Rena's chest. That night, she crept out after dinner and tiptoed toward the coop. She crouched low beside the wall and pressed her ear to the boards. Inside she heard a soft hum, Ebony's voice, low and steady like a lullaby. The chickens rustled but didn't stir violently. Rena frowned, irritated by how peaceful it sounded. Then she saw it. A faint, pulsing light slipping through the slats in the floor. Barely noticeable, like the glow of buried embers under ash. But it was there. Not a reflection. Not a trick of the moon. Real light. She stood slowly, her mouth a tight line. The next morning, Rena cornered her mother as she ground spices for breakfast. "There's something wrong with Ebony's chickens," she said. "They're glowing." Ngoy didn't look up. Glowing? Something's under the coop. People keep walking by and staring. Ngoy's hands paused. What kind of glow? Rena hesitated, realizing how strange it sounded aloud. Like gold. Like light under feathers. "I think she's hiding something." Now Ngoy turned. She set the pestle down and wiped her hands slowly. Her eyes narrowed. "She wouldn't have the sense to trick anyone," she muttered. "Unless." Rena crossed her arms. "You always say she's useless. But what if she's been hiding something? Something valuable?" Ngoy said nothing for a long moment. Then she stood. "We'll see tonight." That evening, Ebony felt the change in the air. The chickens were restless. The wind was heavier. The shadows seemed to stretch across the yard before the sun even set. She tightened the coverings over the eggs beneath the coop and checked every corner twice. She whispered calming songs to the birds, but her own voice quivered now. That night, after the fires were low and the crickets sang, Ngoy crept to the coop with a lantern in one hand and a long stick in the other. Rena followed a few paces behind. They didn't enter. They simply watched. Waited. And the light, soft and golden, flickered beneath the floorboards, betraying the secret the earth could no longer keep. The moon hung low that night, pale and distant, casting a ghostly sheen across the rooftops of Amuko. The village was asleep, but the wind whispered restlessly between the huts, carrying secrets too heavy for silence. In the main compound, the fires had died down to soft embers. But Ngoy lay wide-eyed, her jaw tight, her thoughts thick with suspicion. She had not spoken of the light she saw under the coop to anyone beyond Rena. She didn't need to. Her thoughts spun fast, faster than her hands ever could, weaving imagined riches, explanations, schemes. If there was gold beneath that coop, then it belonged to her. Not to that orphan. Not to that useless chicken girl who had always been a stain on her household. She waited until the third rooster's crow, the time when even spirits doze, then wrapped herself in her wrapper and took her heaviest cane. The lantern in her hand trembled slightly with each step, its light forming long, dancing shadows on the path ahead. She didn't knock. She didn't call Ebony's name. She simply stepped into the coop like it was hers, nose wrinkled at the scent of feathers and straw. The chickens stirred, some clucked in protest, a few flapped their wings but didn't scatter. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the dark. Then she saw it. The corner. The boards disturbed. A faint outline in the straw that didn't belong. Moi dropped to her knees and yanked the straw aside. Her fingers scratched at the dirt. The chickens squawked louder now, but she didn't stop. And there it was. A golden egg. Her breath caught. Not painted. Not polished metal. Gold. Warm, glowing gold, as if a piece of the sun had curled into an egg's shape and slept there. She lifted it, held it close to her lantern. Her hands trembled. But not with awe. With greed. She didn't care how it had come. Or what it meant. All she saw was wealth, enough to buy fine wrappers, new lands, servants, perhaps even earn respect beyond this dusty village. Then she heard a soft gasp behind her. Ebony stood in the corner, eyes wide with fear and pleading, her wrapper falling off one shoulder, face smeared with sleep and confusion. "Stepmother, please. I can explain. You dare hide this from me?" Moi's voice cracked like a whip. "I didn't know at first. I was afraid. You think you can steal from my house? From under my roof?" "I didn't steal," Ebony whispered, stepping forward. "The hens, they laid it on their own. I only kept them safe." "Lies." Moi hissed, and the cane in her hand flew forward. Ebony staggered from the blow. Her cheek stung, skin already rising with heat. She didn't cry out. She never did. "You've been practicing witchcraft in this coop," Moi snarled. "Feeding these birds devil chants. Summoning curses. I should have known something was wrong with you. Always too quiet, too obedient. Sorcery hides behind silence." "I did nothing wrong," Ebony said, her voice shaking but steady. "They laid the eggs on their own. I didn't make it happen. I just cared for them." "You think that makes you special?" Moi stepped closer, grabbing Ebony's arm. "You think this coop is a throne now? That this gold belongs to you?" "No," Ebony whispered, "but it doesn't belong to cruelty either." The second slap came harder. Ebony fell to her knees in the straw. Moi breathed heavily, eyes wild. Then she turned and stormed out of the coop. Moments later, she returned with rope and the padlock used for the grain hut. Rena followed, silent and unsure, eyes darting between her mother and Ebony. "Lock it," Moi ordered. Rena hesitated. "Now." She obeyed. Ebony sat in the corner, still breathing hard, lips trembling but head unbowed. The chickens huddled around her, flapping nervously, sensing the wrongness in the air. "You will stay here," Moi said, glaring at her through the slats. "You will not eat. You will not drink. You will sit in your filth and think about what you've done. And when you're ready to tell me your sorcerer's secret, I'll consider letting you out." Ebony didn't respond. She simply looked down at the floor where her hidden eggs once lay. Moi stormed off, dragging Rena behind her. The coop fell into silence. Day one passed slowly. Ebony sat in the straw, dizzy with hunger, throat dry from thirst. The sun baked the roof until the coop became an oven. Chickens scratched and shifted, restless. She whispered no songs, too weak. Only her eyes moved, watching, remembering where each egg had once been buried. That night, she dreamed of her mother, standing in a field of feathers, singing. But when Ebony tried to run to her, her feet were too heavy, made of gold, anchoring her to the earth. Day two, her lips cracked. Her vision blurred. The chickens began to peck at her skirt, confused and hungry themselves. Still no one came. No water. No voice. Only the wind through the boards and the faint clucking of the hens. Day three, she lay curled in a ball. Her stomach cramped with emptiness. Her thoughts blurred into a haze. But through it all, one thing remained clear. The eggs were not meant for greed. They were a blessing, yes, but not a gift for those who would bury the giver in chains. As night fell and Moi's greed sharpened in the shadows of the house, Ebony's silence deepened into something else. Not surrender, but stillness. The kind that comes before a storm. The third night came with the smell of rain. Heavy clouds rolled in like grieving ancestors, dark and slow, thick with thunder. The sky above Amuko pulsed with heat and tension, as if it too had heard Ngoi's wickedness and could no longer stay silent. Inside the coop, Ebony lay curled on her side, breath shallow. Her lips were dry as cracked clay, and every part of her body throbbed with hunger. She hadn't spoken in hours. Even her thoughts came and went like drifting smoke. But somewhere deep inside her chest, past the bruises and the hunger and the silence, a song stirred. It began as a memory. A hum, slow and steady, wrapped in her mother's voice. A song about waiting. About truth even when buried in dust. A song once whispered during long dry seasons, when the yams grew bitter and the streams thinned. Her mother used to hum it while braiding Ebony's hair, pressing kisses into her scalp, saying, "Even the earth knows. Even silence listens." Ebony's tongue moved, rough and slow, and the first note escaped her mouth like a sigh. Then another. Then more. She sang. The words came haltingly, dry as corn husks, but they came. Her voice trembled, weak and wavering, but each note was filled with memory. Around her, the hens stirred. They shifted their wings and pressed closer to her, their eyes wide, their bodies forming a warm shield around her broken form. The wind began to rise. Outside, palm leaves rattled like bones. Dust danced in the air, swirling into spirals that curled toward the sky. The first boom of thunder cracked through the clouds like a warning drum, and a streak of lightning split the night in two. Ebony didn't stop singing. Her song grew stronger. She sat up slowly, pain screaming through her limbs, but she did not stop. The song left her now with more force, louder, clearer, no longer just memory but prayer. Her mother's voice joined hers in her mind, then voices of women she'd never met, old voices rising with the storm. The coop glowed. Not from lanterns. Not from fire. From within. The hens' feathers shimmered like sunlight on water. The dirt beneath Ebony's knees pulsed golden, and from under the straw, soft lights flickered, dozens of them, growing brighter with each beat of thunder. The wind howled. Rain began to fall in hard sheets, drumming against the coop's roof like ancestral feet marching. The storm bellowed, wild and loud, but inside the coop, a stillness bloomed. A strange warmth filled the space, thick with power. Ebony's eyes closed. She sang louder. The hens began to cluck in unison, low and rhythmic. It wasn't panic. It was music. The entire coop vibrated with sound and stormlight. Ebony's song broke into the bones of the night, carving itself into the wind. Lightning struck the ground nearby with a flash so bright it lit up the entire compound. Ngoi stirred in her bed, uneasy, as if her name had just been spoken by something older than her memory. She sat up, confused, heart pounding, but the rain masked the strange hum that was rising from the chicken coop. The night passed like a dream caught in fire. By dawn the storm faded. Only a low drizzle remained, and the wind sighed like it had finally exhaled. When Ngoi stepped outside at sunrise, her wrapper clinging to her damp skin, she saw the coop door swinging open, broken off its hinges. The sight made her stop cold. The ground outside the coop was glowing. Golden eggs, dozens of them, littered the straw and the dirt, some still warm, some glistening with rain. The hens strutted calmly through them, clucking as if nothing were out of place. And in the center of it all sat Ebony. Her wrapper was torn. Her face pale. But her eyes were brighter than the storm. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't afraid either. She looked like someone who had seen the other side of death and come back with lightning in her breath. Ngoi gasped. What is this?" she whispered. Behind her, a few villagers were already gathering, drawn by the light, by the sound, by the stories that had been stirring for days. Rena stood frozen, mouth open. Ebony didn't speak. She stood slowly, her limbs shaking but held up by something unseen. The hens parted for her as she moved. The girl who had slept beside them, sung to them, wept into their feathers. They looked at her not with fear but reverence. And the eggs glowed brighter. The villagers stepped closer, their feet crunching softly on the wet straw. No one said a word. They saw the eggs. They saw the girl. And they understood. Something sacred had happened in the dark. The silence thickened until one old woman finally whispered, "The earth has chosen her." Ebony turned to Ngoi, her voice steady despite her weakness. "I told you I did not make the gold," she said softly. "I only gave care." And the earth heard. Ngoi staggered back, the weight of her own greed rising up like floodwater. Ebony turned from her and walked slowly into the drizzle, golden light clinging to her footprints. And behind her, where chickens once slept, gold now sang. The news traveled faster than footsteps. By midday, every corner of Amuko buzzed with one name, Ebony. Children sang it in the alleyways, women whispered it at the stream, and the old ones shook their heads, wondering if the stories were true. Golden eggs? A coop lit with stormlight? A girl cast aside now glowing like morning fire? The elders heard it too. They sat beneath the great Irako tree at the heart of the village, fanning themselves in the rising heat, until one by one they agreed, such a thing must not pass without judgment. The sacred must be named. The guilty must be revealed. And so they summoned her, Abony, the girl of the coop, and the others tangled in her tale. Word came quickly to the compound. Moy paled. Rena froze, unsure where to stand. Abony, still weak from her 3 days of hunger and storm song, said nothing. She simply wrapped herself in her cleanest wrapper, tied her hair with a piece of sky-blue cloth her mother once owned, and walked toward the Irako tree. She did not walk alone. As she made her way through the village, the chickens followed. One by one they trailed behind her, Bright-tail, Mama Redbeak, the crooked-toe hen, all clucking softly, their feathers catching the sunlight like oil on water. A low murmur rose from the villagers as they stepped aside. Even the dogs grew silent. The girl once called Dirtborn now walked like the wind carried her, and even the animals bowed to her path. When Abony reached the clearing, the elders were already seated. 5 of them robed in earth tones, their faces carved with age and experience. The village had gathered in a wide circle, leaving the center open like a waiting mouth. Moy arrived moments later, dragging Rena with her, her face arranged in a mask of innocence. She straightened her wrapper and lifted her chin, but sweat had already broken along her brow. The oldest elder, Baba Okoro, raised his hand. "Speak, child," he said to Abony. "Tell us how the storm found you." Abony stepped forward. Her voice was soft at first, but each word found its strength. She told them of the coop. Of her exile, her hunger, her care for the hens. Of the first golden egg. Of how she chose silence to protect the mystery. Of Moy's anger. The beatings. The hunger. The storm. She spoke plainly, not with bitterness but with clarity. Not with pride but with truth. As she spoke, the hens gathered around her feet, forming a soft, rustling circle. They did not wander. They did not peck. They sat beside her as if standing guard. Gasps rippled through the crowd. When she finished, Baba Okoro looked to Nwoy. "And what say you, wife of Medu?" Nwoy forced a short laugh, stepping forward with false confidence. "She is a good storyteller, I give her that," she said, waving a hand. "But I am her mother. I know this girl. She has always been strange. She must have hidden those eggs to trick us, to shame me. Perhaps she stole them from the north, from travelers. This is all just a show." The elders said nothing. She continued. "I found only one egg that night, and I was going to bring it to you, I swear it. But she turned the birds against me with her sorcery. Look at them. Sitting like people." Then Elder Nena, sharp-eyed and always silent until the right moment, spoke. "If you found only one egg, where are the others that vanished from the coop floor this morning?" Moy faltered. I do not know." A short nod from Nena. 2 boys stepped forward from the side of the gathering. Each carried a calabash. They stepped to the center and opened them. Gasps broke out. Inside were 3 golden eggs, still dusted with feathers and straw, exactly like the ones Abony had hidden. The boys placed them at the elder's feet and stepped back. "These," said Nena, "were found behind your hut, beneath the cooking stones." Moy's mouth opened but no sound came. Rena shrank back in shame. Baba Okoro stood. "You let greed blind you. You forgot kindness. You forgot your duty to a child under your roof." Moy fell to her knees. "Please. I didn't know." But the elders had heard enough. Then, turning to Abony, the eldest spoke again. "You showed patience where others would have cursed. You gave care when others gave cruelty. You guarded the sacred when it would have been easier to sell it. The wind chose to sing through you." He looked around the circle. "All who agree that she be named the Golden Keeper, raise your hand." 5 hands rose. Abony bowed her head. From that day the coop was no longer called a coop. It was called the Hen Temple, and Abony was its guardian. The golden eggs remained untouched unless she deemed one a blessing to be given, to the sick, the childless, the poor. The hens still laid, not every day, not for greed, only when the song was sung with a true heart. And whenever the wind blew softly through the village, the people said it was the earth humming in thanks for the girl who sang in hunger and rose in truth. That night, the sky above Amuko was soft and deep, with stars like scattered cowrie shells. A hush lay over the village, not the silence of fear or sleep, but something fuller, like the whole world holding its breath in awe. The hens in the temple nestled together, calm and warm. The golden eggs glowed gently beneath them, no longer hidden but no less sacred. And Ebony, newly named Golden Keeper, lay beneath her straw blanket on the smooth clay floor of the coop. But she did not feel cold, nor small, nor low. The air smelled of feathers and soil and quiet magic. Her body, though still tender with bruises, felt light, as if part of her had already crossed into a dream before her eyes even closed. When sleep finally claimed her, it did not come quietly. She was pulled into a place made of mist and silver light, neither sky nor earth. There were no huts, no trees, no wind. Only feathers falling gently around her, and the distant hum of a lullaby she had not heard in many seasons. Then she saw it. A great white hen stepped out of the mist. She was massive, tall as a cow, her feathers so clean they shimmered like moonlight. Around her neck hung a string of beads, the same amber and coral ones Ebony remembered from her mother's shrine. Her eyes were golden, glowing, and yet gentle. She looked at Ebony not as a creature but as a mother would, proud, knowing, eternal. Ebony fell to her knees, her breath caught between reverence and disbelief. The hen spoke, but not with the cluck of birds or the growl of beasts. She spoke in Ebony's mother's voice. "Child of my blood," she said, "you did not sing for reward, and that is why the reward found you." Ebony's eyes filled with tears. The white hen stepped closer. The world often forgets the girls it pushes into corners, the ones made to eat behind huts and sleep beside animals. But the earth never forgets. It sees every bruise, hears every unshed cry. "I didn't know anyone heard," Ebony whispered. The hen's voice was soft as down. "The wind carries truth. And tonight, it carried yours all the way to the place where the old mothers gather. We watched. We waited. We wept with you when your hands shook from hunger, and we sang with you when your throat dared remember our songs." Ebony reached out a hand, trembling, not to touch but to understand. The hen lowered her head. "You were never cast out. You were planted. And now, child of dust, you bloom in gold." Ebony wept. "Will the others see now?" she asked. "The girls still being fed scraps, the ones locked in rooms of silence?" The hen nodded slowly. "They will. Not all at once. Not everywhere. But the light you carry will find them. Every girl made to kneel will one day rise, even if she must first do so in dreams." A pause passed, soft and sacred. Then the hen opened her wing. Nestled beneath it were countless white feathers, and among them, a single golden one. She took the smallest white feather and laid it gently at Ebony's feet. "This is not magic," she said. "It is memory. The mark of those who endured. When you doubt," she added, "press it to your heart. It will remind you of who you are. And what kindness can become when given without demand." Ebony nodded, her voice too full for words. The white hen stepped back, her glow growing brighter. "Now rest, keeper of the coop, daughter of the dust. The earth is listening. And it hums your name in the language of leaves." And with that, the mist folded in around her like wings. When Ebony woke, dawn had only just begun to stain the sky. The chickens were still asleep, their breath slow and warm. The coop was quiet except for the soft stirring of straw beneath her. And there, resting at the threshold of the door, was a single white feather. It was small, simple. No shimmer, no glow. But as she picked it up, Ebony felt her mother's hand on hers, and the dream flooded back like sunlight over water. She held the feather to her chest, closed her eyes and smiled. And outside, far beyond the village, a breeze stirred in the direction of another girl, one locked behind silence, another made to sweep floors she would one day own, and it carried with it a soft hum. The first notes of a song only the forgotten remembered. The days that followed were unlike anything Amuko had ever known. Whispers gave way to songs. Curiosity became reverence. And the place once mocked as a corner of filth and feathers began to draw footsteps from across the village, and beyond. At the center of it all stood the coop. Once made of crooked wood and patched tin, it had been a place of shadows, of silence and shame. But now it glowed with care. The villagers gathered each day to rebuild it with their own hands, piece by piece. Carpenters brought new planks of irako and mahogany. Potters brought clay for walls that would breathe in the summer heat. Women came bearing palm leaves for the roof and strings of beads to weave through the rafters. And at the heart of this temple of feathers sat Ebony. She did not wear a crown. She did not carry a staff. She sat barefoot on a woven mat made by the village grandmothers, her back straight, her eyes soft, her presence like a calm pool after storm. Around her, the hens circled, not with panic or hunger, but with the slow grace of sentinels. They moved as if they understood that their dance was sacred. Each morning, Ebony would rise before the sun, sweep the coop herself, feed the hens with her own hands, and sing the songs her mother taught her, songs of healing, of memory, of light hidden in ordinary places. Her voice, though never loud, carried far. It curled through doorways, slipped beneath rooftops, and stirred something deep inside those who heard. Soon the villagers began bringing offerings. A boy arrived first, carrying a small basket. Inside was a hen with a bent leg. He said it belonged to his grandmother and asked if Ebony could bless it. She nodded, took the hen gently in her lap, and sang to it, stroking its feathers until it closed its eyes. The next day it walked straight. Then came a woman with her coughing child. She sat outside the coop, weeping softly. Ebony called her in, placed a palm on the boy's chest, and whispered a verse from her mother's old chant. That night the fever broke. The day after, a farmer arrived with 3 eggs wrapped in a cloth. He had no sickness to cure, only a heart full of thanks. You make the hens remember how to be mothers, he said. And now I remember too. Word spread. Not just of the golden eggs but of something deeper, something humbler. A blessing without price. A kindness that asked for nothing in return. Soon chickens were not just animals in Umuko. They were seen as carriers of messages, as companions to dreams. Girls stopped kicking them out of courtyards. Boys stopped chasing them with sticks. And every hen that laid was thanked softly, the way one might thank a friend for staying through the night. As for Ebony, she never moved into the main house. She refused offers of silk, of servants, of silver. She remained in the coop, now reborn, not because she had no place to go, but because the earth had made it holy. The place where her tears had fallen. Where her ribs had ached with hunger. Where her songs had summoned stormlight. She would not abandon it. It had seen her crawl. It would now see her reign. And reign she did, not with rules but with rhythm. Not with orders but with stories. Children came to sit around her feet in the evenings, listening to tales about hens that whispered to spirits, roosters that chased away fear, and feathers that remembered love. Rena came too one day, timid and alone. She sat at the back and said nothing. Ebony saw her, said nothing, but offered her a calabash of water and a slice of yam. Rena wept as she took it. Even Moy passed by sometimes, not to kneel, not to confess, but to stand at a distance and wonder how a girl she once called worthless now carried the whole village's faith on her shoulders. One evening, a stranger arrived, a tall woman with skin the color of riverstone and eyes lined with age. She carried a blind rooster in her arms and said nothing, only knelt and placed the bird at Ebony's feet. Ebony touched the rooster, sang and kissed its beak. The next morning it crowed at dawn. And so, the coop became more than wood and straw. It became a throne, not of gold or jewels but of feathers and memory. Ebony, once nameless among the hens, now had a name known across hills and rivers. They called her Hen Mother not for dominion but for devotion. And when the wind passed through Umuko, it carried her voice, soft and strong, like a song left behind by someone who had once been broken and now bloomed with light. Years passed as years always do, sometimes slow as honey, sometimes swift as floodwater. The coop-turned throne remained, though age had softened its corners and vines now wrapped lovingly around its posts. The hens still clucked, still laid eggs in quiet glory, though the gold no longer came every week, nor did it need to. The true treasure had long since revealed itself. Ebony had grown older but not old. The lines on her face spoke not of worry, but of laughter, of song, of nights spent beside children who had no mothers and mornings shared with chickens who listened better than most humans. She moved with a grace that came from pain survived and peace earned. Her hair, once tightly braided, now flowed freely like threads of soft black night, streaked with silver. The village of Umuko had changed too. Where once girls had been silenced, now they sang. Where once rags were a mark of shame, now they were stitched with pride, bright with the colors of survival. Where once the coop had been a place of mockery, it was now the first stop for travelers, pilgrims and parents holding sick children in their arms. They came not to worship Ebony for she never allowed it, but to listen, to learn, to leave lighter than they arrived. They came from hills, from rivers, from far coasts where no chicken had ever clucked, just to hear the songs she whispered at sunrise. Some called her healer. Some called her spirit touched. But most called her what the storybooks now printed, the girl who laid gold. Ebony herself never claimed the title. In fact, she never called herself anything more than henkeeper. When people asked if she truly laid the golden eggs, she would laugh softly and say, "No. But I once wept beside the ones who did." She never married. Not because no one asked, they did many times, but because her heart had already been poured into something far deeper. Instead, she filled her home with the quiet joy of children who had nowhere else to go. Orphan girls. Castaways. Children deemed too loud, too wild, too broken. She fed them with her hands, taught them to braid their hair with dignity, and showed them how to listen to the wind. She gave them songs, not just to sing but to survive. Some girls stayed for only a season. Others stayed for years. But every single one left knowing who they were, and believing that their pain was not the end of their story. And sometimes, just sometimes, a girl would hum to a hen in the hush of twilight, and find a golden egg beneath the straw. It didn't happen often. But when it did, no one screamed. No one shouted. They simply bowed their heads in silence, knowing that a blessing never arrives with a trumpet, only with truth. And when girls elsewhere were beaten or mocked for their torn dresses or their quiet voices, someone in the crowd would always say softly, "Careful. She might be laying gold too." The phrase became a proverb. It crossed borders. It was painted on walls in cities. Grandmothers whispered it while stirring soup. Young boys said it with awe, even if they didn't understand. Careful. She might be laying gold. It was not just about Ebony anymore. It was about all the forgotten girls. The ones eating alone behind houses. The ones walking barefoot down red clay paths. The ones who knew the taste of dust and the sound of being ignored. It became armor. It became fire. And yet Ebony stayed the same. She still sat barefoot on her mat, still hummed to her hens, still brushed hair and wiped tears. Sometimes on quiet nights she would walk to the sacred tree where her mother lay buried. There she would place a feather, sometimes gold, sometimes white, and whisper, "I did what you told me. I let the dust rise." She never asked for more. But the earth gave anyway. Flowers bloomed early near her hut. Rain always knew when to fall. Children born in her presence never cried, only stared up at her with eyes wide and still. One day, as she sat beside her youngest adopted girl, a curious traveler asked her, "If you had the power to choose, would you have changed what happened to you? Would you wish the Coop away? The hunger? The shame?" Ebony looked down at the child, who was feeding a hen with bits of roasted yam, and smiled. "No," she said. "I would only wish for more kindness. Not for me, but for those who come after." And she turned her face to the sun, her shadow falling long across the earth like the wings of a bird preparing to rise. That night the sky burned deep orange. And when morning came, the hens laid nothing golden. But somewhere in a nearby village, a girl with bruised arms and a torn wrapper found a feather beneath her door, white, soft, and impossibly warm. And she knew what it meant. The gold was already inside her. She only had to sing it awake.